Hello, and welcome to the Teaching Our Kids podcast, a place for teachers, parents, and everyone in between to learn about how kids learn. Hi, Becky.
Hi, Ash.
All right, so let's get started today. We're talking about social emotional learning, and it's not necessarily about like socializing and emotions, it's more like about the social emotions that kids have, like how they interact with other people and the emotions that they use. And we're going to talk about it, how it is presented in public school and how public school supports parents with it, and then how you do, on your own without any public school support, what you guys do on a day to day with unschooling. Um, so, and early childhood mental health, I did like a couple looking up on like some definitions, and it's basically how kids experience, regulate, and express a range of emotions as they develop relationships with others and get a sense of self. So that's kind of what that social emotional. It's still like it's. I don't want to like lump it in with reading and math, and because it's so much bigger than that. But that's the same kind of like that's what they're learning, that how to regulate their emotions and develop their sense of self and relationships with others.
Right, learning like who they are and
Yes.
how they themselves interact with the people in the world around them.
Right. And like it's like the psychology of like how
This
their
might be one of
brains.
my favorite
Right.
subjects.
It's so crazy. I could do an entire we're doing this 12 episode thing. We could do a whole another 12 episodes just on this topic. So it's going
Right.
to be tough to try and I'm going to try and keep us reined in here today. But real quick, another thing, a lot of these social emotional skills have stuff like self-awareness, so perspective, empathy, self-esteem. So this is all stuff. A lot of it's more parenting than school. Like
Mm-hmm.
to me, it should be more supplied by parents, and that's kind of where I want to start when I go to the public school side of it. I think the biggest part ways that schools for kids is just parent attentiveness and involvement, like with their kid, having a connection with your kid. And because when they're at school, I don't have control over, their social emotions and what they're doing. They're there away from me. They have to take what I've given them at home and use it there.
Yeah.
Um, so, and the school has a lot of stuff to support them as well in that, and I'll sort of talk about it. But I just want to say, for me, it's one of my most important roles as a parent is teaching them this skill. Like, it's just
Yeah, I agree.
so important. Everything else builds off how you teach them how to regulate their emotions and how they interact and all that. So, um, just while I'm on that, I have a couple really cool things in my blog to support parents while they're starting to teach their kids about social emotions. And it's I have an attention cup blog, which is filling your kids' attention cup so they feel
Mm,
happy, and a power cup blog because when kids have a sense of power, they tend to have a stronger sense of self too. So that's
mm-hmm.
also, I'll link those two things. And just a lot of stuff about connecting with your kids, and a lot of that's important to building those social emotions. I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm going to talk about the school side of it. Um, but I have those things, um, and just things I try and do at home to help like teach them for what they need at school is modeling how to react, how to have the social behaviors. Um, and I reinforce their good behavior more than punishing their bad. Just things that I do to help encourage for when they get to school that are good. So that's
Yeah.
my little soapbox about what I do at home because I'm going to talk more about the school side.
Well,
Um,
I want to just add something
Go ahead,
there.
go.
How many years are kids spending with their parents before they even get into school?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, and many times, yes, I understand that your child is often, especially if you're a working parent, a lot of kids are going to nursery school, but they're spending a lot of time with parents prior to these
Mm-hmm.
traditional school years. So that's that's like really prime time to start talking about these types of things. And even if it's just begins with modeling the behavior um,
Yes.
yourself, and being a good example for your child of, how to be empathetic, or how to
Mhm.
manage large emotions, or how to problem solve, like all of that. There's plenty of time to do it before they get to school, and if there isn't a lot of time or attention or thought put into that, it really sets kids up for a difficult time once they get dumped into traditional schools.
Yes, it's gonna make stuff hard if you don't
Hmm.
teach them how to, like, start regulating themselves. If you just, like, let it if there's no guidance, yes, I agree. Um, Teaching that empathy, perspective, cooperation, there's so many things I know, without even realizing I'm teaching that, like, just 'cause that's.
Hmm.
So, I don't like I said, this is such a crazy big topic, so I'm trying to keep it down. And we could do a whole maybe we'll do a whole nother 12 episodes on this alone, but basically, that social emotional piece really starts at home, like you just said. It starts early and you got to support them. And then when they get to school, just here's some things, the quick rundown that public school has. Most schools have a counselor or a school psychologist that are there that
Hmm.
support. So if there is kids that are really struggling, they have that person that can help. Um, they help support the parents, the kids, the teachers with any of those needs, like helping to teach the empathy, the perspective, the cooperation. Some kids will need it more than others. Some they'll even make individual plans for if there's kids that are really struggling, like some kids, with autism, or like that their parents are even having a hard time working with teaching them certain skills. They build a plan to help them with those social emotional behaviors even, and these people will support them. Like, a lot of people know that word IEP, which is individualized education plan, but they also have like individualized behavior plans, which is what is it, IBP. So
Okay.
there is a whole thing about that. So
But
that
that is
goes.
separated out from the day-to-day learning
Yes.
by putting it with the counselor, right? Like this isn't something that the teacher necessarily is managing.
Oh, well, not like it's not all on her, but she will be a part of making that individualized behavior plan. She will have goals that the kid, like, I just saw a TikTok or a Insta about a teacher who was like, my principal is in my room, and she's like, why is this kid sleeping in the back of your room? And he's like, he's meeting his goal right now. He is not throwing a chair out
Mhm.
of the window or whatever. Like, so, but that's extreme circumstances. And there's even special schools where kids, like public, that will take kids that are having a hard time in the main school, and you can accept it, and it's still in the public, like it still will be paid for. You don't have to pay. Parents don't have to pay
Right.
extra. I have one friend, Crystal. She works in Pennsylvania, and she is works at one of those schools. And I have a friend here. She works at a program called Teen Diversion, where they have kids that need extra with that social emotional piece, but
Right.
still teach them. Um, so there's a lot of interventions, like we sort of talked about in the reading one. But
Hmm.
regular day to day, say for your average kid that doesn't necessarily have any of those extreme needs, here's one of the things my school does. It's called, you probably can't see any of it because it's on this blue paper. It's called Capturing Kids' Hearts, and they send out this newsletter. And this is where they have like a character building curriculum, and it's
Hmm.
sort of schools can purchase it or be granted it, and it's like a social and emotional learning curriculum. And this one has like a monthly challenge word for families, like kindness, respect. Let's see, this month is, where is it? Courage, I think. This month, we're focused on helping students to understand that courage is not a magical remedy for fear. Instead, courage is a choice to push through the fear, self doubt, and anxiety to do things that feel hard or frightening. But we get one of these once a month, and they do little challenges in school and on their social media, like parents give affirmations to your kids about courage. It says engage in courage role play, empower for roles at home, to have the courage to do things. So they kind of support and give parents ideas on teaching that social emotional piece to their
Right.
kids. It's
Right, but there are plenty
important.
of people who maybe are uneducated in this area, that
Right.
not only uneducated in the science behind it, but also even in how to model the behavior, or what are good activities for, you know,
Mhm.
kind of helping your children further understand their emotions
Right.
outside of school.
Exactly. And or just like some of it even like reflecting on what you're doing with your kid. Maybe that somebody will
Mhm.
catch this and say, "Oh, courage." Like, should I be talking to my kid about courage? I don't know. Have I talked, like just making somebody stop and think. They do a lot at Harry and Lily's school. They do a lot of affirmation stuff too. Like they have whole in everywhere that like even in reading and math they have little affirmation cards, and so they're able to like they write each other like I like how you read that story to the class today, and
Oh, that's
so it's
great.
a lot of like teaching them to be positive and to each other. They do it to the teachers, to the kids. They send them home. It's very cute. Positive behavior incentives, which when I taught, it was called PBIS, and basically there was a whole like I even went to a whole training for it on positive behavior incentives. In you did it like a school wide thing, and it would trickle down. And my kids have like these rise cards they get when they do a good job. They get all these cards, and they so let me try and slow down and break this down. The whole school is broken up kind of like the Hogwarts houses, but into clubhouses. And
Okay.
they're rainbow colors. So they're Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Um, so they take the grades and split them up. So Lily's in green clubhouse, Harry's in purple, and they have different grade levels. But like they compete against each other and they get these rise cards. And
Hmm.
whoever has like the most rise cards like wins, they win awards. And the rise cards are like when teachers catch them doing good behavior, they give out good affirmations. You're working really hard today. Like any good behaviors, good social emotional behaviors, leadership behaviors, whatever. They pass out these cards, and then they also like draw them at assemblies, and kids can win prizes for them.
Oh,
It's
cool.
it's really awesome. I have one catch about that I don't like, and
Tell
that
me.
is my kids are good all the time. And
Mm.
so they tend to get less of those cards than the kids who are misbehaving more because the teachers, like, when they're good, they're like throwing them at them.
Right.
And so they get their names pulled. They get a lot more of the positive stuff sometimes than my kids. And it's just a little uneven. And Harry notices. He's like, I never get called for a ride. I don't have as many cards or
Right. It's like they need, what do you have in golf? A handicap?
yeah, it's
Right.
tough. And I understand when you're in it, you're just trying to do the best you can with that, but it's hard to balance it.
Right.
So,
I would even challenge it a little bit further than that, to say that how you're going to have kids who are not outgoing, who are not extroverts, who are not
mhm,
social. And so but that doesn't mean that they're not doing a good job
right.
of learning who they are. Right. So if
Mhm,
they are soft spoken, or don't like speaking up, speaking in front of others, or being the
mhm,
center of attention, how is it that the teacher then can understand or recognize that they are processing or maybe making a good decision?
right. Well, and I think sometimes the teachers do a great job of that, of noticing those quieter people or the people, that are just toeing the line, and they
Right.
will pull it out, but it's just more notice for the louder,
Right.
crazier, more stronger personality ones, like you're
Right. Like
saying.
my 8-year old Tegan, I mean, he would win this type of competition. He
Yes.
is like the people pleaser. He would be the teacher's pet. Like he wants the recognition.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, my middle child, Callan, he does not give two hoots what anyone think. Like he's not in it for the
Right.
accolade. That is not his thing.
Well, And to me, they might even give him more because they're trying to draw him out sometimes. It just
Mhm.
depends on, Anyway, so that's one of the things they do. They do lots of fun, games and community team building stuff with them through that um those clubhouses, which is very cool. They get like character awards each. I think it's some quarter. I think they do like quarterly awards. So they give like character awards, for being a good leader or for following, whatever word, like the word on the capturing kids' hearts. You were
Uh,
really exemplary at modeling courage this quarter. You get, this rise award. So that's sort of in a nutshell, ways that the schools can support that social emotional learning. I mean, obviously, you'll get teachers that are and staff and that are better at it than others that are more communicative with the students and parents about it all the information. I don't know. It's just so much. I'm trying to like boop. Here it is. But that's basically it. They have like the character building curriculum, the positive behavior incentives, school counselors and psychologists, and then just you need that parent base is
mhm.
what you have. So to build those things, that self awareness and perception or perspective and empathy and all that. So that's what school has. If you want to go into a little bit about how you do it just on your own. I mean, you just get that you are the parent base that just continues. So, is there anything what's something you do to start when you were starting when they were younger and then like your
Um,
top things? I don't know.
this is a really hot topic for me because it, like you're, I think what you're trying to convey is that the social emotions are intertwined in every aspect of life. So
Mhm.
there are so many variables to this subject that you could really go in a route down 8,000.
So many rabbit holes. I'm trying to stay out of them right
Yeah.
now.
I'm probably not going to do a good job of that, but I
I'll
will
keep you.
do
I'll do
my
it with you.
best. um, so I kind of think of these from three different standpoints.
Okay.
And the first one really was probably had a lot to do with why we chose tradition or unschooling over traditional schools. Um, Unschooling, or not even unschooling, but homeschooling, I would say really strengthens a family's bond pretty significantly. And that's kind of like a no-brainer because you're spending all of your time with your children.
Mhm.
Right. I would say that this is one of the reasons that we chose our school homeschooling over traditional schools, and that's because we we probably take a lot of time that I don't even want to say that other people don't, but we are really invested in our own personal development.
Mhm.
Eric, if you know my husband, I mean, if you were to come and look at my bookshelves right now, the books, um, these are these are all the kid books. But there's another bookshelf over here that you can't see that is just all personal growth and development. I mean,
Mhm.
it's three shelves of just that, and then they're all upstairs. And so when Eric came to this point in his life and wanting to better himself and create the best version of himself, the way he starts that process or that journey is just to start learning. So what we've started to do is to really understand um, what our emotions are, and really start to challenge our own beliefs around parenting.
Mhm.
And I think that like you were saying, it requires a parent support or
Right.
foundation. What I think for me, it has to start with me, and what I mean by that is first, I have had to confront a lot of um, maybe the resentment or the struggles that I've had when I look back at how I was parented.
Mhm.
So you probably grew up in a similar household. I think a lot of us in this generation grew up with what I call traditional authoritarian authoritarian parents,
Mhm.
right? And what I mean by that is children say or do what their parents tell them to. They speak when they're spoken to. They they have to have manners. They have to be polite. They have to share. And I don't necessarily agree with all of that anymore. So I've had to kind of challenge like how I feel about that first, because I know that it's ingrained in me based on how I was parented, and I know that I don't feel right about it. So how am I going to make some changes? What are my beliefs of parenting? Because if I
Mhm.
don't know what that is first, how can I truly
Change
model
it. Yeah.
to my
Well, and then
children?
some of those things will happen and it'll trigger you, and even though you don't want to be triggered, you're like, "Ah, oh my gosh, it's insane." But that so basically what you're saying, which I like, I'm going to try and get you back on track here, but you guys chose unschooling because you are both very self-reflective on your life choices, especially when it comes to that social emotional piece and um not self-help, but just like your sense of self. You're very what's the introspective about it,
Mhm.
and you want to be have a strong model of that for your kids, and really feel passionate about it. So that's why you chose to kind of one of the reasons you chose to do the unschooling, so you could have, I want to say it's almost like with the lack of control of unschooling, it is like a control though, because they're always kind of under your scope of
Well,
like
I would say that I think that one of the reasons that relates to this in why we chose homeschooling is because this is not necessarily, there's not a lot of space for it in school because
mhm,
there is so much time required for learning,
right.
and there's a lot of requirements for children to sit down and be quiet,
Mhm.
and they have to do what the teacher says. And I'm not degrading or pushing back against schools or trying to say anything negative, although I do have my opinions. That is required when you
Right.
are trying to move a group of 30 children along, right? They have to
You
listen to what you say,
yeah.
have to be quiet. They can't sit and run around right? Like you're not going to get anything
Mhm.
done. But that doesn't allow a lot of space for my kids to truly understand
Yeah.
what's going on in their bodies.
Yeah, it's
And
school has that very strict line for that social emotional piece that they have to kind of fall into.
mhm.
There's tangents, but it's pretty strict, and whereas yours is like the big wide open line with like the learning is the smaller part on the
Right.
page.
Yeah, exactly. Um, you said something earlier that was my next kind of sub point under this, and that's really we've had to kind of understand what triggers us.
Mhm.
Um, and triggers are really about. I just heard somebody say on TikTok the other day. I follow a therapist, and she said triggers. When you're triggered, you're in the past, right? So you are, for example, when my kids don't acknowledge me, if I say
Mhm.
something and they don't say yes, mom, or
Mhm.
got okay, mom, I got it, or if they're not going to do what I've asked them and they say, can I have 5 extra minutes to finish it? Like if I don't get acknowledgement,
Yeah,
whoo,
it's hard. Yeah.
I see red, it triggers me. And I think that that has to do, and I'm not certain, but I think
Yeah.
that it has to do with, my upbringing. And if I spoke as a kid, I wasn't necessarily considered. My perspective wasn't valued
Mhm.
as much as an adult's was because I'm a
Mhm.
child, not an
Right.
adult, and that was again the authoritarian
Mhm.
upbringing. So I have to understand my triggers so that I can identify when I am triggered and then manage that.
Right.
So if I don't identify my trigger, then I just blow up. I'm not again modeling the behavior that I want my
Right.
kids to use when they are triggered.
And this is such a like deep, it's so like it's so personal to you because
Oh,
it's
very.
your kids and your
Yeah.
I was talking to my sister the other day about like daycare versus being a stay-at-home mom and how it's almost easier for daycare people, like even though they might have more kids, they're A, getting paid, and B, they have that emotional like they don't have the same
This-
emotional like this is my child, this is my like I am doing this. So it's easier sometimes, for them to handle some of this social emotional kind of
right,
pieces because it's like it's not I don't know, rooted inside you like you as a
right.
parent.
They're not, I mean, like a marionette doll, or like, they're not kind of tied together
Right.
with those family bonds and all the
Yes.
nuances that come with that family
Mhm.
relationship. They're distanced, and they don't have the same triggers that moms do.
Right.
Um, the
Right.
third thing under it starting with me, or how it starts with me, is I have to practice healthy self-care. And I don't do a great job at this. My husband is much more practiced at self-care than I. And I think a lot of moms probably suffer from the lack of
Mhm.
self-care because we give our kids everything, more often than you see men doing. And that's not to degrade men either.
Uh-huh.
Just like that. We made these people, right?
Right. Yeah,
So
it's tough to
all
break that ideal too. So,
right. All of that is really where the social emotional learning starts in my house. That's with the adults and us
mhm.
starting to, or doing our best to understand our own emotions, and practicing good coping mechanisms, and so that we can model the best way possible. The next is having good conversation with our children.
Mhm.
I wanted to get a book for this podcast on the prefrontal cortex and childhood development, and I couldn't find one at my local library because there's like a literally a 10 book section.
I've
10 books
yeah.
is what I picked from. So I ran across a book. What's it called? It's so good, Ash. You have to read it.
All right, I will.
It's
Tell me
called
it.
The Art of Talking with Children by Rebecca Rowland.
Okay.
And she, a lot of it, I think we know at a high level, but it's such a hard practice. But she talks about how rich conversation is, conversation where we stop talking at our kids and we start listening,
Mhm.
where we acknowledge what they've said, where we challenge them to think more about what they've just said, and where we are feeding into their interests in conversation instead of trying to drive the ship of like learning all the time.
Mhm.
Something that she talks about, and there was actually a New York Times article written about it, is we live in a world of relentless parenting, where we are constantly parenting, learn. No, don't use this fork, use that one. No, don't put your shoe on this way, tie it that way. And it's just relentless. And that really limits your ability to have rich conversation with your child and
Mhm.
hear them, and in the end the result is a lack of connection
Mhm.
and a lack of respect and trust
Mhm.
that your child has for you, because you are essentially telling them that what they're trying to say or what they have to say to you isn't important, doesn't matter, you don't care about.
Mhm.
While you're not necessarily saying that, and you would
Right.
likely, any parent would disagree that that's their opinion, their
Mhm.
behavior does not model that belief.
Yeah. It's Parenting is so insane, man. Especially, oh, like I was just saying to you earlier about like the baby kids versus the kids now. My like
Mhm.
our well, yours are you're sort of on the edge of that little baby still since you got Lula, but
Yeah.
they're just kind of that like my second and fourth grader are just independent, but they're not so independent enough. They're like, forget you, mom. Like they still ask me regularly for permission for things and um still have a lot of needs that I still have to meet, but they're just so, it's not like, and now I can give you a green cup and you can rationalize that even though you wanted the red one, you're like, okay, well, this, I could still drink out of, like, it used to be like, no, I want the red cup.
Yeah, right.
We're there now and it's really cool. And it's interesting that like once you start setting them out into the world and they start doing like having those experiences when they come back and they just talk about it to you like and so and yours not going to school, they get a lot of that from their neighbor friends and from your experience like your other homeschooling friends and from family. I think family can do a lot of that, especially like the different age groups, because I know
Mhm.
you talked about that before, like kids can learn from, they don't always have to be put with their peers to
Right.
learn. And mine in the neighborhood all play, all ages together, and it's really awesome. And I feel like they learn a lot from the younger kids following the older kids,
Right.
and then younger kids learn empathy and patience, helping out with some of or the older kids learn that with the younger kids following them around sometimes. So it's very cool. And I sometimes it's upsetting when like bad things happen, like an upsetting experience, but I like because mine are still at that age where they come back and they want to talk to me about it. And then I can give them
Mhm.
like the guidance. And I like you're saying, you want to maybe not over parent, but like I'm still here to like give them some ideas at this point. Like, this is something that you can let go and you don't have to hold on, like, you don't have to be upset about or guide them, even if I don't tell them that exactly, which I probably do more than I should, especially I need to read that book you were talking about. But letting them come to that kind of a conclusion with some guidance, um, I think is just a cool challenge. And
It's cool to watch kids think and
yes,
to come to things on their own. And it's
yes,
really difficult for me personally not to even dangle the carrot in front of them, right? Like,
right. It's so I do it too much. I
to
think
let
I too
them,
much.
just to let them, it's so much more rewarding for me as
Yeah.
well in that moment. Um, Something that I heard that she referred to in this book, I think was the book. She talks about there was a study of some study with dads where when dads asked questions, they said W questions. So questions that start with, who, when,
Mhm.
where, when, why. Um, right. Like questions that are open ended, they were suggesting that really increases childhood verbal development down the road.
Mhm.
But those questions are what make their brains turn, and you
Mhm.
can even give them pose a question to them that might lead them, to the next kind of level of what you're trying to get them to think, but then
Mhm.
they surprise you and give you an answer that you're like, oh
Right.
wait, I didn't even think of it from that perspective either. um, but yeah, it's really cool to see things happen because our kids, even your kids, are just still so young and
Yes.
still developing. Their brain is still growing and they're still experiencing. They're going to have millions of experiences from now till their early 20s that are going to have a significant effect on how they think about themselves and how they think about themselves and in the world. And um,
Oh, here's another little social kind of emotional interaction we just had recently where I don't know, some Harry's playing with some friends. They're doing something he doesn't like, and my response is always like, "Well, did you talk to them about how you feel?" Or like,
mm,
like instead of just being upset and like leaving or
mm,
dwelling on it, I always like, talk or like or you can just leave if you want or I'm upset, I'm leaving or whatever. But Andy just posed this thing, and I feel like it's an interesting, especially as Harry's coming into that middle school. I mean, he's fifth grade next year, so he has one more year of
Right.
elementary school, and then he'll be. But he's starting to come into that, and Andy sort of gave him this out of saying he could, if he is uncomfortable in a situation, he could blame it on us.
Mm,
Like I got to go home now. My parents are it's dinner time or it's getting dark. Like instead of being like, "Well, I don't like this," and you all are like kind of at least he knows that feeling for himself, but
yeah.
also like for that peer pressure kind of thing. I thought that was interesting, and I hadn't been thinking of that, and Andy said it, and I was like, okay, I need to think a little bit more like that because
That's
that
a really
weird
good way,
social
like, a
thing.
break, right? Like we talk a lot about taking a break, taking a pause. If you're in a moment
Right,
where you can't make a decision and you're flooded with emotion, then your rational brain isn't on, and
right,
and so you need a minute. And it's hard to say in that time where they have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. They
right,
can't say, "I feel mad when you
right.
throw the ball at me." They
And
they just
these
like attack the kid or
Well,
scream or
and
cry
those
or
other kids aren't since they're starting to get in that emotional, weird, turbulent stage, they don't always accept it in a way that's rational either. Like they'd be like, "What are you bear?" Like I don't know.
right.
So it's kind of a cool, good, like you said, a way for him to take a break. Oh, and then putting that blame on us, which I'll take it. It's like
Right. Well, it gives him an out. It gives him
yes,
a way of feeling comfortable and getting himself away
right,
so that he can self-regulate. We
mm-hmm,
talk about taking breaks a lot in our house, and that's when we have, emotional explosions. That's one tactic that we use. Please, and it can be a break with someone. It doesn't have to. I really don't like kind of
right. A
making them
timeout
do it
away, yeah.
on their own, because in that time, sometimes kids, all they need is a hug and to just cry or to scream with someone next to them.
So let
Um,
me steer this back to our school thing real quick because that
yeah.
is definitely something I didn't necessarily hit on at school when kids are in having that overwhelmed state and the
Mhm.
guidance so the guidance counselor can be there for them for that. But like imagine having a kid like that in your classroom and you have 30 kids and how do what are you going to do? And that's where it's a lot easier to be at like you chose to be at home. So if you can guide, it's that bigger area of learning for the social emotional and at school it's not. So
Right.
they still have, ways the kids can go out of the class and calm down in the hallway or go to the counselor or they have like reflection rooms sometimes or
Mm.
like
Okay.
like a paper you can fill out. I was feeling this way, and they have like calm music playing, or it's darker. So
Right.
there's things like that at school too to support that, but it's still fewer and far between, and less time is put towards it than you do in your setting of being at home. So that taking a
Yeah.
break piece.
That's again, it's really important to us because this is
Hmm.
such an integral time for children's brain development, and I really enjoy having the ability to give my kids space to figure it out and
Hmm.
to have to tell them to be quiet and move on. I want to teach them how to learn about themselves and how to um, understand and cope with what's going on inside of them. And I didn't get that as a kid. And I mean, talking about emotions in my house was even difficult.
Hmm.
So that's personally why it's just so important to me.
Another little tangent I'm going to go here too is that staying, like you're saying, so strictly following on those rules in school all day, when they get off the bus to me,
Oh gosh, I've heard about the after school.
sometimes it
Okay.
is explosive and insane. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget Andy coming home, like, you've only had him here for 5 minutes. What's happening? And I'm like, yeah, but they've been in school all day. Like, good. And then they come home and they're at their safe place with me. And it's like, blah, blah. Like Lily, as she's been doing it to me lately. She just wants to throw her coat everywhere. She's like out on the floor, like, ah. And I kind of got to like let her like,
Yeah.
sometimes we come right in and we go to gymnastics and we come back and we have to do homework. I have one day a week she has gymnastics. So
Mhm.
sometimes that's a little extra. But, like,
Right.
some days I just gotta let her just and then sometimes Harry will come off and all the injustices happen on the bus, and he has to tell me about everything so passionately right away. And he's like, "And this happened," and it's so much of, like, that an explosion of all of those things that have been held in all day and not like, it all comes out of the head, so that is it happens. It's there.
Yeah. We don't struggle with that as frequently or as much. I still think that there's a lot to be said for just, being socially drained at times. We
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
even just getting up and getting the kids out for errands a couple days a week. Once we get back, that as soon as we get home, they're like, "Mom, can I do this? Mom, can I do that?" Mom, and I'm like, "Whoa, slow the
Yeah.
wheels of the bus, please. Let's get in the house." And we have a wind down period.
Mhm.
So I don't, in transitioning from one task to another, they get eager to do the next thing, and
Mhm.
that period tends to be crazy town. So I just require some, let's do our responsibilities and cool off and center ourselves and then decide what we're going to move on to next.
Mhm.
Um, that's a good segue, talking about the ability to switch tasks, into the last thing that I wanted to touch on, which I'll try not to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but I talked about for the social emotional learning in our house. It started with the parents.
Mhm.
And then the next really large point coming from the book that Rebecca Rowland wrote, that rich conversation matters so that we can build trust with our kids, so that they will open up to us about their feelings, and so that we can have really meaningful conversation around that. Um, Thirdly, for Eric and I, we have to understand the science behind the brain in order to set realistic expectations for ourselves.
Mhm.
Again, we are analytical people, but I think that this really can apply to a lot of parents. If more parents understood the limitations of a child's brain
Mhm.
at the age that their children are, I think that it would make parenting less stressful at times.
Yes. The expectations we have are here and the kids are here and
Yeah.
you're like, "Why? Why is this what am I doing wrong?" Oh, and it's not.
It's
Yes.
not you.
Yep.
It's not
Yes.
you. So, just a couple, I won't go too far, but let's just talk about the prefrontal cortex. So that is the decision making part of your brain. It's in the
Okay.
front of your brain, right?
Mhm.
And it is the last part of our brain to develop.
Mhm.
So I think the most recent study shows that it is not fully developed until 25 years old. 25.
Some
Um,
people's probably never fully developed.
yeah, right. Um, so that part of your brain is the decision making part. It's
Mhm.
responsible for planning, for thinking about the consequences of your actions, for rational thinking, emotional control, problem solving, reasoning, like all of these tasks that are kind of wrapped up in this social emotional topic comes from our prefrontal cortex. And knowing that it's not fully developed until 25, I think just speaks volumes to, like, whoa, hold on, I'm not
Mhm.
dealing with an adult, right? You're not dealing with someone who is actually capable of doing what you're asking them to do in many situations.
Yes.
So um, there was, for example, some things that come along with expectations. And I think this comes from, like, a lot of social constructs too, right?
Mhm.
Because we're taught generally by our society that kids should kind of be controlled. They should do what you
Yeah.
tell them. They should be on their P's and
Right.
Q's. And if your mom says something, then, or your kids having a fit in the store, or they're not doing what their mom told them, then those are bad children.
Mhm.
Um, but that's not true.
Mhm.
It's that they are incapable. And one of the social constructs that I think comes across, I hear about often, is forcing our children to share.
Mhm.
So if a child doesn't share, they're a bad kid, right? Oh, well, that kid won't share with me. Well, don't play with them, right? They're not friendly. Um, Again, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for this. And there was a study done that showed 3 to 4 year olds out of that group, only 8.7 of them, 8.7% of them gave a piece of candy to their friend. So at 3 to 4 years old, they were given the choice, would you like to share a piece of candy with a friend? And only 8.7% of them said yes.
I also, oh, go ahead. Finish your.
I'm when this study was repeated, but the group of kids was 7 to 8 years old, the percentage increased, but still only to 45%.
Uh-huh.
So 45% is much higher, but this just goes to show like they lack empathy and this like the impulse control
Oh, it's so less.
just required to give up the thing that they want. So the social construct says that children should share, people should share. Yes, we do want to promote being fair to others and inclusive to others, but that's not something that's necessarily capable, your child is capable of at that young age.
Also, I always think about this like if you're sitting in a coffee shop typing on your laptop, it's like, hey, share that with me.
Exactly.
No. And why is your kid
If
not
you want,
allowed to do the same thing? Like, I never, sharing is one of those things I did that I was like, if you want to, you can, but I'm not going to make that kid, share that, I'm not going to say you
Mhm.
have to give it to them. Go find something else, and when they're done, you can have a turn. But
I just
yeah,
want to talk
that's
about this from
crazy.
the stance of expectations for
Yes.
parents who get upset with their kid or who say, if you don't share, we're going to go,
Mhm.
and you bring on all this stress to yourself as a parent. What am
Yes.
I doing wrong? Right? Like you're not doing anything wrong, and not nor is your child. It's just about setting realistic expectations.
Yes.
If you understand what they're capable of, then you have a realistic expectation to go out into the world with. If you
Yes.
expect them to do something that they're incapable of, then you're going to be fighting an uphill battle for the rest of your parenting life.
This is another one of my favorite little analogies is I always think about parenting like the freaking Grand Canyon and these kids and you're growing from when they're a baby to when they're 25 and you're building a wood slat bridge across it. And you want them to get to this one little goal of sharing. And
Mhm.
you have to every time you like do one little like encouragement, it's a new slat
Right.
in the bridge and you have to keep saying the same things and modeling and being positive and it just takes
Impatient.
25 years to make your bridge of whatever. Maybe
Right.
not sharing, maybe it's some other thing, but that expectation, you need to realize you have to like it's huge.
Right.
It's just continuous and sometimes you get exhausted and drained from it and you're like, I'm gonna hang off the side of this bridge.
Right.
Like jump. I'm done. No. I do
I'm jumping
see.
into the Grand
Yeah.
Canyon now.
I,
It was
I
nice
don't
knowing
want to do this anymore. But you still gonna. It's crazy. But yes, that you are so um right about that with the expectations of it for parents. Yes.
a couple other obvious ones, or not obvious ones, but big ones that I think hit home for me, and I wanted to just point out here is that the prefrontal cortex is involved in the ability to switch tasks. It's not the only part of the brain, but I know that that's a big one for many children, right?
Mhm.
Like, okay, guys, we got to turn the TV off now. It's time to go. Or, hey, come in from outside to have dinner. Like, switching tasks is hard for a lot of kids. And
Mhm.
again, if you as a parent, or if I as a parent can understand that this is going to be a difficult time and give my kids some grace in this
Mhm.
difficult that they're having, then it's just going to make it easier for me. I'm not going to bang my head against the wall because I'm not going to think this is my goal to get them to do this thing and they should be able to do it, but they're not doing it. If I
Mhm.
just understand like this is a really hard thing for them to do, how would I feel in this moment trying to do something that's difficult? It makes it easier and it gives you more empathy and compassion, and in that moment I think you're also, again, you build trust with your kid
Mhm.
because they see you giving them some space.
So I have a quick little side note. What do you do when you notice yourself like about to get on that struggle bus of an
Mm,
expectation and you like catch, like, how do you get yourself, reel yourself in? I don't know.
That's the goal. That's like the golden question.
What do you do? Because
So
I don't
I
even know how I would answer that right now.
Well, first I have to say, like, I'm still at what I would consider in a really early learning stage and transitioning stage from like control parenting and
Mhm.
trying to move more into like authoritative parenting or a kind of like a gentler parenting role. So I don't have great practices yet, and I still lose my shit a couple times a day. But when I feel myself getting there, my kids, it's funny, they know. I have
They
started,
catch you.
they catch me. So I've started breathing. And breathing is just one. Sometimes I go outside for a walk and take the baby with me, or I move myself into another room. But breathing, I just start doing really deep, audible breaths.
Mhm.
And Tegan immediately goes, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm being triggered right now. I am doing my best to control myself, to
Uh-huh.
calm myself down so that I don't scream at you." And then I can say, like today when I was trying to get them all out, I asked Callan to get dressed. I don't know how many times. Why I asked that many times, like I also don't know. I shouldn't have. I should have said it once and been done with it. And then when they were leaving and he's still not dressed, brought it up again. But
It's hard
I,
to not do that, man.
right, it really is. But that's the control piece that's been
Uh-huh.
taught that I am a parent and I should control my kids
Mhm.
and they should do what I say. So I finally said to him, dude, I've asked you at least 14 times now to put your clothes on, and I'm getting really frustrated. So I not only breathe audibly, I tell them how I'm feeling and I do it calmly.
Mhm.
And then and I also touch them. So instead of, because I find myself screaming across the house a lot, and if I'm in the kitchen like washing dishes and trying to get them to do something at the same time, that doesn't work. So I another mom that I am like friendly with in my unschooling bunch, she does a really good job of just walking over to her kids, putting her hand on their shoulder and waiting for their full attention. And so that gets the full attention and I can say, I've asked you to do this thing.
Mhm.
Do you need help? What's going on? And he told me, like, I'm doing my Rubik's cube and I'm timing myself. Cause I just see him fiddling with the toy and I'm like,
Right.
what are you doing? Get out, go, move. But he's timing himself and he's doing this because his brother's timing himself. So this is very important to him and he doesn't want to stop
Mhm.
because he's timing himself. And
He's
so
focused on
I
that. Yeah.
right. If I were doing something that were very important to me,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna want to be rushed.
Right.
But then that leads to like people are waiting for him.
Uh-huh.
So we have to have the talk of, listen, I'm okay with you taking your time to do things, but once it gets to the part where you are impacting other people around
Right.
you,
That's the social emotion of, oh, I'm,
right?
yes. Yeah.
How would you feel if you were in the car and your brother was here fiddling
Mhm.
with his Rubik's cube? So, but then you have to be really careful of going too far down that because
Yeah.
that, like, it's not the time to have that conversation.
Right.
Like, so then I offer help. I give a timer. Like, there's a bunch of different tactics, but the breathing is the first one I do for me. And you're right, because you have to in that moment take care of you first. Like
Mhm.
stop trying to control and go take care of you so that you don't explode.
I know, I'm going down a tangent here. I don't want to do this, but one of the hard times for me is in the morning getting ready. I do a lot of that night. Let's go, get your stuff,
Yeah.
huh? And they just want to play.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, huh? And part of it is I need to wake up a little earlier because if I woke up
Mm.
earlier, then I would be more, oh, I have my stuff done. I can just sit here and let you all like
Mhm.
whatever. But when I'm like doing my stuff, and so like kind of setting yourself up for a better
Yes.
mood as you're going in, like you said, with the transitions, like give yourself grace, you know, be ready for it to be a harder
Take care
time
of
and
yourself.
get
Right.
yourself ready for it. Yeah. So
And
I
that's
noticed that
and that's
too.
also a great example for your
Mhm.
kid. If you
Yeah.
are being showing responsibility, showing up in like, I'm stressed, I'm going to get up earlier, they're going to notice that at some point.
Mhm.
And that conversation might even come up like, Mom, why are you getting up at 5:30, right? Or how long
Mhm.
have you been up? Or and
Right.
that chill will start to kind of slowly ease up and
Mhm.
kind of seep throughout your house,
Yeah.
and it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just finish up. The temper tantrums also come from the prefrontal cortex because they lack ability to express emotion. So we talked about the sharing, we talked about inability to switch tasks, and temper tantrums because lacking verbal or emotional, they, lacking the ability to express their emotions
Mhm.
verbally. All of those, I think, are really common behaviors that parents struggle with their children, and that all comes from prefrontal cortex. So things that
Which
ways
again,
of
not fully developed till 25, right?
right. So when your 24-year-old is
Yeah.
having a temper tantrum, blame it on the prefrontal cortex. So a couple just tips for parents, or I mean, I use these. If you can show empathy and compassion during the hard times rather than um,
Frustration and
frustration,
impatience.
impatience, right? Those can all create shame. If you can
Mhm.
lead with kindness and compassion and empathy, that is going to make it easier on you and the kid to get through
Mhm.
together. Also, accept emotions. Don't label them as good. Don't label them as bad. They are emotions, right? We don't need to call them good or bad things. They don't need labels. Um, and from that you can practice control. So if your kids can accept emotions and they can identify what they are, that's what will lead you down
Mhm.
the path of how
Them.
we deal with those. um, some tactics that we've already touched on these, but a few others like breathing, deep breathing, um, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I saw one the other day where a mom practiced it with a 4-year-old, I think, where she was holding her child who really didn't want to brush teeth and was having a meltdown about it. And she was rubbing the child's chest and they were talking and like rocking. And she said, let's play the candle game, and made her little girl blow out the candle. So she would like
Mhm.
hold her finger in front and just got that breath work going.
Mhm.
um, Exercise. Like Callan said one day, Mom, when I run, it really helps me calm down. I was like, guess what? Next time you're pissed off, you're running a couple laps.
Oh yes.
Take a walk, or just even getting a drink of water are all different ways
And these
to
are for kids
stop.
and parents
Yes, this
because
is
you
not
need it
just a young
too.
kid.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
hopefully that's water and not vodka or wine, although we
Yeah.
know those at times. But and then lastly, it would be, don't try and talk through the emotion in the emotion.
Right. When you're in the moment of it, let it be. And yes, it's hard.
I'm
I have a hard
terrible with
time with
this.
that. Same bad. So bad.
I'm like, we are gonna solve this problem now. We're gonna talk through it. No,
Yeah.
their prefrontal cortex is off. Their rational brain is off. So any developed part of that is turned off. They are in
Mhm.
fight or flight. They cannot talk through it. Another time to talk about this is, say you guys are doing bedtime, right? Or say you're having some personal time making while you're cooking dinner. Like, you can
Mhm.
have a 2-minute conversation about, how did it feel earlier when your brother took the thing from you? Can you name the emotion? I felt angry. All right. What are some ways that you might deal with anger next time? Or
Mhm.
how do you feel about the way that you handled that situation? And it can just be like a quick thing and then move on. I tend to beat a dead horse, and one of my,
I laugh at you because same.
oh my God,
Same.
I'm so bad.
Andy, what does he call me sometimes with Lily? He tells me I'm in a Chinese finger trap with her. He's like, just
Uh-huh. Power
stop.
struggle.
Yes.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Um,
Oh man. So
so,
just again, I want to say back to like because we go off a little bit, but this is such a
Yeah.
fun topic. I know a lot of people who are going to really like listening to this, Becki. Thank you for all your research. It was awesome. Um, but back like for the school unschool, just to bring it back, I really like that analogy sort of I made where in school the social emotional piece is tiny and all the reading and math is like the big meat of it. But in unschooling, that social emotional piece is really the big meat of it, and the reading and the math is just the smaller side fringe benefits there. And it's true. It's very cool. This, kids can come to the same, when they hit that 25-year mark versus unschooling or public school, you'll be kind of at the same zone, but getting there is a different road.
Right. Yeah. We're
So,
just on different roads. That's a really
uh-huh.
technology option,
So it's very cool.
especially confirming that kids will get there. They
Yes.
will get there. For the art of talking with children,
Mhm.
Rebecca Rowland, um, there's a section that says it's called the end goal of learning.
Mhm.
And this really just stopped me in my tracks because it has a lot to, it relates to our unschooling approach, but it wasn't an unschooling book. But it really supports what you're saying, where traditional schools and unschools, your kids are going to get to the same
Right.
place, right? But they're doing it in different ways.
Mhm.
Um, but here they say that the end goal of learning, it's not about getting good grades or performing well. It's about learning how to learn. It's the key to children's mental and emotional health. This learning helps them find and explore their passions in life. And it's essential for our well being that we connect with our true passions. And that was written by an author, Ken Robinson, of another book. But I think as we teach our kids how to learn, whether it's about reading or learn about their social emotional skills, um, that we're not we shouldn't be judging their performance, right? It's
Mhm.
just knowing that if they can learn how to learn, they're going to figure out life.
Yeah.
And that,
Right. The rest of it is easy.
yeah.
I have a couple of blog posts about the social emotional piece, and especially mine's more about parenting than like necessarily teaching, but just that connecting with your kids and attention cup and power cup. And I'm going to link them if anybody wants more. And I'll definitely share that book that Becki mentioned, The Art of Talking with Children by Rebecca Rowland. I'll link that in the description too, so everybody can read it. So thank you. And I'm not sure what topic we're doing next, but I'll let y'all know when I figure it out. All right.